thank you also very much for taking time in your busy schedule to come and listen to us, come together and discuss how we can make a difference in our beloved continent. Some of you may have seen the video that's going around this weekend, where there's a gentleman talking about how they have a plan, the colonizers and others from around the world have an agreement that sub-Saharan Africa must never be developed because their sheer survival depends on the underdevelopment of sub-Saharan Africa. For those of you who have not seen that video, please make sure you reach out to Amira or to Sylvia and make sure you have a chance to look at that video. It's frightening, it's infuriating, but unfortunately, that is our reality. The reality is the economic structures and financial structures of this world were created, just like Brother Thomas said, for their benefit to the detriment of the developing countries. Majority of them are, of course, African countries. We must understand that. The question then becomes, is that going to be the destiny that we are going to leave our children, where we have no control of our natural resources, where we'll never be able to be in a position to own our Africa? As a mother, as a grandmother, I would like to say hell to the NO. We cannot allow that to happen. And I know when I say that, I'm speaking on behalf of millions of mothers and millions of grandmothers out there. As the origins of humanity, as Black women, we are mothers of humanity. As Black men, you are fathers of humanity. Life as we know it began in Africa. Why is it then the originators of humanity as we know it are being treated as the scum of the earth? The world knows what is being done to Africa is unacceptable. The exploitation of Africa can no longer continue. There are many good people who are not Black who wish Africa well. The biggest problem I found is that they simply do not know the games the powers that be are playing against our Africa. Many well-meaning people, they're sending donations to Africa, they're sending aid to Africa. If only they understood that Africa, the economic status of Africa, is designed to be that way. It is a plan that fits into the bigger global picture. And that until we begin to understand what is being done to us, there's no way we can begin to change our circumstances. I remember when I started speaking to what France was doing to Africa, and I highlighted the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. I was once talking to a class at one of the universities, and one of the students was French. Even as late as last year, he asked a question and he said, "Ambassador, I grew up in France and we were taught that the Africans were not civilized and that the French went to Africa to civilize the Africans. I never heard what you're talking about the French taking over $500 billion out of Africa every year. French themselves, French citizens, were not aware of what their government was doing in Africa. The same is true with many citizens of those Western countries that are exploiting Africa. The well-meaning citizens of those countries are not aware of the bigger strategy, the games that are being played by their governments on Africa. Everybody feels sorry for the continent. I wonder how these individuals who set out to exploit the motherland, how do they go to sleep every day? How do they tolerate the suffering that Africa is enduring? The millions of babies who are dying every day from starvation, the millions of women who are dying every day while giving birth to another life, the millions of unemployed youth who are dying, committing suicide, some of them out of desperation, hopelessness, and despair. All those conditions created by those who seek to continue to exploit our continent. What they do is create situations that we end up fighting ourselves over piddly little things that don't ultimately matter. Because until they decide that Africa can change, nothing is gonna change. The problem is we, the victims also, don't quite fully understand what is being done to us. So we are meant to fight for which brother, which sister got more of the chunk under the table. First, we must realize that they don't see us as their equals. First, we must realize that we are under the table. First, we must realize this table is in our house and that the food they're eating is food that we would have cooked for them. Then we go under the table and we wait for them to drop off a few crumbs as aid to our beloved continent. Crumbs from our food that they're eating on our table in our home. The only problem is we don't realize that we are under the table. And while we are under the table, they are making rules, creating laws and systems that keep us under the table, fighting over which brother and which sister got the larger chunk of the crumbs under the table. And while we are under the table, they want us to engage in diplomatic conversations. How do you have a diplomatic conversation with someone who is sitting on the table eating your food and you are under the table? And we're supposed to be nice. Let's have a diplomatic conversation until they go back to their home and make their own food and eat off of their tables. And we stay in our own homes, eating our food on our tables. Then, and only then, can we have truly diplomatic conversations as equals. That scenario is not where we are today. They don't see Africans as humans. They don't see Africans as humans with feelings just like they do. They don't see Africans as people who have desired just like their children wherever they live. In particular, the Europeans. What French kids, what German kids, what British kids need is exactly what African kids need too. The difference is we, the truly rich people, we are being treated as the poor ones. And after they have exploited us and they are siphoning our natural resources, they add value to our natural resources, they create jobs in their countries, they bring goods with added value back to Africa. And we are reduced to being, once again, consumers. We are reduced to being, once again, consumers. Look at West Africa and cocoa beans. We have a whole city of Hershey built out of cocoa beans from West Africa. We have a whole city called Cadbury built out of cocoa beans from West Africa. Where is Cadbury City in Africa? Where is Hershey City in Africa? Look at Switzerland. We go to hotels and grocery stores all over Africa. We are buying Swiss coffee, Swiss chocolates. Since when did Switzerland grow so much coffee? Since when did Switzerland grow so much tea? Grow chocolates, cocoa beans. It's all coming out of Africa. Some of the best teas and coffees are coming out of West Africa. Our farmers are being paid pennies to the dollar. And once again, we drink Swiss coffee that came from Ethiopia, Swiss coffee from Uganda via Switzerland. That is what I'm talking about, my brothers and sisters. It's about the exploitation of Africa that has been going on for centuries. That exploitation can no longer continue. There is too much suffering in our Africa. And we, the African diaspora, are the only ones, in my humble opinion, who can see clearly what is going on in our Africa. It's very difficult for a man who's struggling to make ends meet in Malawi to think continental. His day-to-day survival alone is mission impossible. And then you ask him to look at the bigger picture and think continental. We have a responsibility to pick up where our Pan-African fathers left. In 1963, when they met and failed to reach a consensus of building an Africa that spoke with one voice, as one continent, one heart, one mind, one soul. So they come up with a compromise decision, which they called the Organization of African Unity. Year in and year out, our African leaders would meet, and the issue of an Africa speaking with one voice was raised. And year in and year out, they failed to reach a consensus until April of 2018, when our African leaders finally agreed on a decision which they are now calling the African Continental Free Trade Area. The African Continental Free Trade Area dictates that come 2021, when the implementation begins, Africa is going to enter the world market as one customs union. The heads of states are saying, no more shall Malawi, shall Botswana, shall Tunisia, with their little bitty basket, go to the world market, while China is coming with a warship, and they're supposed to be equal on this globalized market. African countries are defeated. That's why they have no voice in dictating the price of our natural resources. They tell us what they want to pay us for our natural resources. Who does that? So the African Continental Free Trade Area is supposed to end all that. Here is the dilemma, my brothers and sisters. The brain drain out of Africa that started over 400 years ago continues to this very day. We have children of Africa who were taken out of Africa as slaves. They took the best and the fittest who they felt would survive the transatlantic journey, followed by the more recent immigrants who left in search of greener pastures, others running away from wars and famine. The end result is Africa does not have the capacity, intellectual capacity that Africa needs to build the Africa that we want. Let me remind you that the colonizers for over 600 years, they have been building the Africa that they wanted. An Africa that was designed and built roads that took the lumber from the forest to the nearest exit point out of that country. Railway lines that went from the mine to the nearest exit point out of that country. It was an Africa that worked for them. It was an Africa that they wanted. But now this moment is calling for Africans to stand up, and we must build the Africa that we want. The Africa that works for the children of Africa at home and abroad. The reality on the ground, my brothers and sisters, as we are looking towards the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, let's be clear about one thing. There's not a single African country today that has the capacity to build a railway line. There's not a single African country today that has the capacity to build an airport. Together, however, with the capacity that is currently on the continent and the capacity of the African diaspora around the globe, we have what we need to build the Africa that we want. It is therefore, my brothers and sisters, that I urge you to understand the importance of reversing the brain drain. The brain drain of many centuries out of Africa must be reversed. And that journey of reversing the brain drain begins now. It begins with you understanding the importance of us cleansing our minds of this horrible disease that is called the legacy of colonization, the legacy of slavery, the disease that has taught us to hate ourselves, the disease that has told us to dislike each other, to not trust each other, the disease that is keeping us, even as we live here in the United States. And I know we have others who are listening from outside the United States, but I'd like to use the US as an example because it is a perfect melting pot, which is a perfect example. We're surrounded by what other ethnic groups are doing. Ask for the voices of the Indian diaspora, loud and clear. Ask for the voices of the Chinese diaspora, the Irish American, the German Americans, Italian Americans, all very loud and clear. But when you ask for the voices of the children of Africa, you might as well go to the graveyard. We are missing in action. We are missing in action. That has got to change. What more proof do we need to know that we can no longer continue to be the most disrespected race on earth? What else do you need to understand that you gotta have a serious conversation with the image in the mirror and ask yourself some very important questions, painful as they may be? Why do you feel the white man's eyes is colder than the black man's eyes? Why do you dislike yourself so much? Why don't you trust your brother and sister? Why do you think the way you do? I often tell my white friends that sometimes I wish I could be a fly on the wall when you all are talking about the dumb things that we black people do. We do some of the dumbest things. I was talking to a niece of mine, and she was laughing at herself. She said she's a nurse, and they were getting ready to have a meeting. And some white nurse come along. She was sitting on the front row, and she found herself getting up, trying to give her a seat. And she thought to herself, oh no, I've been listening to Andy. I belong on this seat. So she ran back and sat back on her seat. But she had just gotten up and given up the seat because another white nurse had come to the front row. She didn't think she belonged to the front row. We automatically take the back door. Nobody tells us to do that. We automatically feel inferior. Nobody has ever sat us down and said you are inferior, but it has just been passed on from one generation to the other. Why do you feel the way that you do? Because we have been put to sleep. We have been taught this rule of divide and conquer. We have been beaten into submission and believing that we are inferior, that we're not as smart as they are. But that is wrong, and that is false. It was a narrative designed to keep us where they want us to be. How long are we going to allow this to continue? We have passed this gene of stupidity, this sense of inferiority. We pass it from our children, from one generation to the other. This has got to end, my brothers and sisters. It is precisely because of that mindset that we have normalized the abnormal. If you look at what is being done to us outside Africa, look at what is being done to us on the continent. What makes it even worse is that now we are being used as the instrument of our own self-destruction. I often talk about our own brothers and sisters who work at the World Bank. They're the ones being sent to Africa to encourage African governments to devalue their currencies when we are the ones with the gold. They are the ones who are being made to negotiate bad loans with Africans, loans with very high interest rates, monies that will keep African governments forever paying debt. The average African country today pays over a third of their GDP in debt repayment, and they'll never finish paying that debt. It is all by design. I wonder, all these young Africans who are working for the World Bank, why aren't they telling the heads of states? Why aren't they advising the foreign ministers, the ministers of finance? Don't do this. This could be done this way. But no, they want to preserve their position. So that just go along. And they're now the instruments of our own self-destruction. We have some serious introspecting to do as Black people. And that starts by us realizing and accepting that not only are we sick from this disease of the legacy of slavery and colonization, not only are we in the hospital, in the ward, We are in the intensive care and we need healing. And the only way for you to seek that healing is first and foremost, understand that you're sick. You don't go to the doctor's office unless you realize you're sick. Too many of us don't even realize we are sick. Let's heal from this disease, my brothers and sisters, because if we do not heal, no degree from Harvard, from Yale, from Oxford, or any other big universities around the world can heal you from this disease. You must understand that until we heal from this disease, nothing we do can change our Africa. You go to the boardroom with a colonized mind, garbage in, garbage out. So we are here today to talk about how we first and foremost must heal. We must understand what is being done to our Africa. We must understand how we are where we are, particularly our state of mind. Because once you are awoken, it doesn't matter where you end up, you will make the right decisions about your life, about your race, about your continent. Because everybody else, all other races, all other ethnic groups, they're looking out for themselves. We're simply asking that we do the same. Particularly now, with the African Continental Free Trade Area. Africa does not have the capacity Africa needs to build the Africa we want. Africa does not have the capacity to benefit from what our Pan-African fathers had hoped to accomplish, which is now being the finishing of what they wanted to see happen. The African Continental Free Trade Area as a decision is our only hope for true economic liberation of the continent and people of African descent at home and abroad. We must understand this program and understand it fully. Here is where we are. The Chinese are very aware of this decision. The Europeans are very aware of this decision. The Middle Easterners, the Indians, the Japanese, the Russians, they are all aware of this decision. And they have not only the intellectual capacity, but the financial resources, and they are ready. They have amassed, and they're just waiting for those boundaries that have kept African countries from trading with each other to open up. They are waiting to open their companies, to register their companies within the continent, because with the African Continental Free Trade Area, 90% of the goods that are going to be traded within Africa are going to be duty-free. They want to benefit from that. And because they have the financial capacity, they are the ones who are going to be taking the big continental projects. These projects are going to take 10, 20, 30 years to build, but they will take the contracts. By the time we wake up, all the big continental projects that they benefited from and created generational wealth wherever they live are going to be taken away from us in our Africa. We are going to be reduced to be workers. The Cape to Cairo highway is going to be built. The question is, who's going to own it? We will be reduced to be happy that we are the conductor of that train. We are going to be reduced to being happy that I can get up in the morning and ride a train from Cape Town and spend the night in Egypt and sell my goods there. That is all nice and good. There's nothing wrong with that. But we must also take it a step further. He must own that railway line. Let's take it a step further. That the high-speed railway from Senegal to Djibouti is going to be built. That it's going to be easier for us to fly around our beloved continent. It's not good enough that we have planes to fly. We must also build that plane, and we must own it, and we must own the airport. We must realize that for us to move our Africa, we must manufacture what we eat, what we wear. But not only must we make our own clothes, we must own the textile mill. Not only can we build brick houses, we must own the brickyard. I'm talking about true ownership. The only place that we can do that as Black people is Africa. You see, Black people, you do not go to China and drive the continental agenda, the development agenda for China. You do not develop the continental agenda of Europe, of any other country outside Africa. The only place that you can be on the driver's seat is Africa. My brothers and sisters, I am here to remind you that there is a seat, a vacant seat that has your name. If we do not come together to claim that seat, others are more than happy to come in and take over that seat. And when they take over that seat, our Africa this time is going to be gone for good. This is generational wealth that belongs to our children, grandchildren, and generations to come. We must unite for the sake of defending it by any means necessary. We have a responsibility to do so. Failure to defend what belongs to our children, there is a special place for all of us in hell. We must come together and defend our Africa. We must come together and defend that which belongs to our children, grandchildren, and generations to come. Let me make one thing clear. This is not about us. What we're talking about right here, I liken it to a proverb that my brother shared with me about planting trees in your village, knowing very well that you'll not be there to sit under that shade. Planting the tree in your village, knowing very well that you will not be around to enjoy the shade. That's what it's about. And that is why we are here today. On that note, allow me to introduce to you African Diaspora Development Institute, an institute that I created after leaving the office as African Union Permanent Representative to the United States, an entity that is designed to be the bridge between the African diaspora around the globe and the continent. Its main purpose is to organize the diaspora so we can organize, so we can go home and participate in the development and the building of the Africa that we want. We have several projects that are on the plate, but we now have what we are calling our flagship project. It is called the Travaco project, which is short for Trans-Africa Value Corridor. There are various trade corridors that have been designed and suggested on the continent, but the most expensive corridor to do business in Africa is trade between East Africa and West Africa along the belly of Africa. What we describe as the belly of Africa are countries from Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, DRC, Angola, Equatorial Guinea, Cameroon, Gabon, Congo Brazzaville. That is the belly of Africa. For goods to go from Kenya to Central African Republic, they have to be taken by ship all the way down to Cape Town, and then all the way up the west coast of Africa to Cameroon, only to be ferried into Central African Republic. And yes, somebody just said, what about Sudan? South Sudan, yes. So the belly of Africa, once we can open the belly of Africa, it's easier now to extend into West Africa, Southern Africa, and Northern Africa. The plan is to have a city starting in Tanzania with a major hub port and all the way to Africa, and everything in between. Every 200 to 300 kilometers, there will be a city that's going to be built based on these resources that are readily available in that area. Some cities will be based on cotton growing, all the way from growing cotton to textile manufacturing to the fashion industry. Cities will be built around jewelry. Cities are going to be built around manufacturing, building, construction materials. Cities will be built around manufacturing, hospital supplies, and so forth. To prepare the land for this development, 3 corridors have been established or have been planned. One is called the utility corridor. We are going to need companies that are going to do nothing but lay down water pipelines from east to west. They're going to be companies doing nothing but lay down gas pipelines. Companies laying down fiber optics, smart grids. That is the utility corridor. The next corridor is the transportation corridor, which is going to involve the building of a railway line, high-speed railway line from the east part of Africa to the west part of Africa. Then we also have airports, companies that are going to do nothing but build airports. Others will build the seaports, and others will build bridges. And then we have the energy corridor. that will involve companies that are going to do nothing but build power lines, power plants, be it hydro, be it solar, be it wind, be it nuclear. But we got to electrify the entire region and impact lives of over 500 million people. And then every 200 to 300 miles, a city and everything that is needed in a city, you can only imagine. I'm saying this to say, these are projects that are going to take 20 to 30 years to complete. Now you can only imagine the opportunities that are going to come out of this. We have one of our own brothers, a fellow diaspora who was on the stock market for many years in New York City. But he has since gone home and has been working on this corridor for 15 years. He's been working with the African Union. He understands exactly what the African Continental Free Trade Area is calling for. He understands all the intricacies and how it's all gonna go down when implementation begins. He's now saying, my brothers and sisters in the diaspora, I've done my part. I've done the planning for Travaco. This is a corridor that if we can own it, it will put us on the driver's seat of the African continental agenda, which is exactly what this moment is calling for. This is what this moment is calling for. It's perfect that our brother has been working for 15 years. Before COVID, he was approached by the Chinese. They wanted to give him 500 million, which is what he needs to get started. Fortunately, COVID happened and he was not able to go into any agreement with them. But then since hearing about ADDR, he said, Ambassador, we must own this corridor. So we met, we discussed, we brought in some of our financial advisors who are diaspora, and they gave us a beautiful suggestion. They said, Ambassador, one of them works he is a co-owner of a hedge fund. He said, Ambassador, we can raise a bond, $500 million, with as little as 650,000. For 650,000, we can register a bond. This bond is already funded, and the funds can be available within 60 to 90 days. Now, you know, I got excited. I said, Brother Benunula, we got to go on this one. I said, I got brothers and sisters in the diaspora, 650,000. So I'm asking for $1 million because I also realize that right now, Dr. Benunula, he has all the plan for a training center. So we can start training the young people and expertise that we anticipate we are going to need. So we want to let's put it at $1 million. The remaining 350, we put some of it towards the training center, and the others we're going to be now funding the diaspora who are going to be traveling to Africa to actualize this program. So we are here today, my brothers and sisters, to talk about how we can come together and raise $1 million. $1 million, once we have that, it'll open the doors and put us on the driver's seat of the Continental Development Plan. Then some of you are saying, how can such a project only cost 500 million? Well, Brother Benunula actually has answers to all that. With $500 million, the funds are going to be used to acquire land from a very strategic position. Land that's going to be used for building the cities, and some of the land also has minerals. Minerals such as gold, diamonds, coltan, iron ore, copper. And with that, we monetize those minerals as we continue the construction. And that's how we are going to continue funding the building of the Africa that we want. The highway, the high-speed highway, and the high-speed railway that will connect the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. All of it actualized by the first $1 million. Now, right here in the United States, we're looking at about 50 million Black people. Can we just not find 1,000 diaspora with $1,000? That is all we are asking, my brothers and sisters. 2,000 diaspora with $500, 4,000 diaspora with $250. Can we not do that, my brothers and sisters? This is all we're asking for. So we're here to say, we need to come together. Brother Beninula has done his part. I've only gave you a little flavor of what the project is all about. I'm gonna bring him now to let you hear all from the horse's mouth. More details about this program. He understands fully what needs to be done. And when he's done giving you his presentation, then we have question and answer. For those of you who have any questions, he's here to answer any questions that you might have. Brother Beninula, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arikana. This is truly an honor to be here once again, to meet the engineers, architects, and allied professionals in the diaspora. This is excellent. Africa does not lack resources. Africa lacks organization. Africa lacks the passion to be selfless. And I think ADDI has brought those very, very important ingredients to the table. As you all know, we've worked across many continents, and it's not easy bringing together Black people, but everything has a time and a place. So today I would like to go into some very deep details, and I hope I won't take so much of your time. And the key points I'd like to talk about today, because this is a follow-up discussion with engineers and allied professions, is really, we did the preliminary talk last time, and today it's about implementation. I'm here in the Middle East, and it's incredible what's happening around the world. I think the gods of Africa must be smiling from ear to ear. So I'll first start off with a recap of the global situation analysis. This is not the 1960s, it's not the 70s, nor is it the 80s. The world has changed, and I'll talk about why is the global situation very ripe for Africa's rise. Then I will briefly touch about Travaco. Why is it important for Africa to build these value corridors? And what motivated us to develop the Trans-Africa Valley Corridor. Then number 3, I will zero down on the Travaco Master Plan. We are talking to engineers, we are talking to architects, we are talking to project managers. These are the backbone of what is about to happen. If we lose the planning part, like we say, if you can't plan it, you probably won't be able to manage it. And if you can't manage it, you end up as a rail waiter, in your own railway system. Then number 4, we'll talk about the implementation steps. What's the implementation strategy of Travaco? Those construction and engineering work packages. How are we going to get this done? And number 5, we will talk about the Travaco Project Management Office. We've already submitted our TORs for the next stage, the master plan, including a draft list of professionals we need. And we've already spoken to ADDI about the urgency of creating centers of excellence. And we'll talk about, all these things in the Travaco PMO. Then finally, I would like to touch a bit on the financing. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot finance this using the traditional project finance model. So I'll be zeroing in on patient capital and structured project finance. So I want to begin, ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you about the global situation analysis. It's a big topic, but I'll just summarize it. Number 1, key takeaway. It's inevitable that Africa is the new growth engine of the world. It's a series of things have conspired. Many of these things but if it wasn't for shortage of time, I would propose a minute of silence to the African women. They've provided us the wonderful positive demographics. And I was in Asia, a country I don't want to mention, and they are in total alarm bells are ringing all over the place. I think in previous years, for every one person that was born, they lost 250,000 persons. It's called negative demographics. As in Singapore, oops, I just mentioned them. And I was watching in the evening, and they've created a ministry of, which I could loosely translate as love and romantics. And they are creating love parks. Why? Negative demographics. They can hardly get, their young people to do, the old traditional love making. And unfortunately, if you don't have new human beings coming on the planet, you cannot plan for railways, nor can you plan for power plants because there is no future consumption. We in investment banking, we call it the demand drivers. And in Africa, it's the total opposite. China is running out of rural manpower. Its growth model was premised on rural-urban migration, and they've been, the whole real estate, but China is getting to what we call an economic zero. They are in serious trouble. Let's not even talk about Europe. We know what has happened there. It's terrible. North America, has the immigration patterns from Africa and some from Central America, but the core of America, Europe, and a lot of Asia has reached peak urbanization. We call it the S-curve, and it's very, very worrying. So we all know what has been happening, a lot of quantitative easing, printing of money, but money is like seeds. You might have a very, very big silo, but you need fertile ground. And this fertile ground, ladies and gentlemen, you don't even need to panic, is Africa. So the trade loop, which we call it the traditional trade loop, was the Europe, US, and Asia. The Asians manufactured cheap, invested their excess earnings, we call it Forex, foreign exchange sterilization, and they invested it in the capital markets. Some of us who worked on Wall Street understand the game that was taking place in the mortgage-backed securities, and everybody was buying those toxic assets, but because they thought that's the only thing that would happen. So every 8 to 10 years, the global economy has been having a boom bust, and it has been resetting itself through monetary policy, which is basically the central banks manipulating money, but they've created a very toxic environment. So much money in the world that it has to get a place. Traditionally, this money has been like flood water, breaking into weak countries, creating wars. And unfortunately, there are certain things I wouldn't like to discuss here that has made that a very bad and losing proposition. And so in short, this is not a cyclical event. This is a structural problem in the global economy. There is as well a truth that everybody tries to avoid. It's the ethnic dimensions of capital. The problem with us Black people, every time we meet any person of another race, and 9 months later, after pregnancy, the baby that jumps out is not white or Indian, it's Black. And this has brought a very big fear when we guys working in the capital markets. You could have the best project, but ultimately they say, well, you guys are going to swallow us up, Unfortunately, we can't do anything about our melanin composition. That's a discussion for the doctors like Dr. Arikana, but it's a truth that has dictated global capital. But now this structural problem is facing a rethink. I was sitting in a country in Asia where they've given directives to their CEOs that you must marry Black women. And the Black men are being told you must really integrate, because the future of this planet lies in integrating into Africa. Otherwise there's no way they are going to come and take everything. So this discussion has been rather made very urgent with this thing called the pandemic, COVID. I'm being asked in Asia, I'm being asked in the Middle East where I am now, why aren't Africans dying, you know, and falling and collapsing? I don't know whether it's the UV or some African gods that are showering blessings on us, but whatever it is, there's now a new concept called monetizing the environment. There is a premium to being in equatorial Africa, and they are all scrambling because it's really very, very bad. Now, China and Asia need a market for their excess capital. They really have excess capital. They have excess manufactured goods. But we in Africa are like a cow. You need to first feed us before you can milk us dry. Otherwise, there's no milk. We can't be the effective consumers, and they cannot be effective consumers for themselves. So I gave a plenary in Beijing, and you know, everybody, the usual suspects were there, and they all challenged me. European Investment Bank, you know, World Bank, you know, Exim Bank, Sinosure, and I told them, look, you've got it wrong. Unless you provide a different form of capital to Africa, where we become like, you know, the Marshall Plan, then Africa will be able to become a global engine. And we have all the factors that can help the global economy. It's really spluttering and stuttering. And this is how Travaco became like, you know, a very admired corridor. Dr. Arikana hinted on the kind of money they have put before us. And this was a result of our interaction with them. We're looking to convince them to change their capital. So ladies and gentlemen, Europe and America have a problem, and so does Asia. And why? It's because the model they have adopted for the last 40, 50 years, the so-called Bretton Woods, is very, very predatory model to the developed countries. In other words, we had to stay poor and they had to become very rich. Why? Anytime you develop a railway, anytime you try to develop a railway in Africa, they ask you for an off-taker, somebody who has capacity to guarantee the future of the infrastructure for the next 20 years, at least 40%. It's called an off-taker. Nobody in Africa, you know, a manufacturer has that capacity. So you end up with a big, with a big miner or a big, you know, commodity trader. And what is their interest? It is to get the commodity as efficiently as possible to the port at the least price. And this is called the extraction model. So Africa has been plagued by a system we didn't create, by a system that was created by the great powers, and it's called the project finance model, where our kids go to school, you know, like we all did, unadvanced degrees, but it's studying in a system that was created. Now, this very system has come home to bite them in the butt, forgive my French, because now, you know, they cannot just take iron ore to Qingdu in China, produce real estate, because they are running out of people and they are running out of demand. And the loop I talked about between Europe, America, and Asia has just snapped. So they are all scrambling, excess capital, excess manufactured goods, and Africa is still asleep. We are still thinking about the post-independence era, where we were walking around, you know, heart in hand. And this brings me to the next part of my discussion, which is why Travaco. We all know that Africa has begun waking up. You know, there's a new generation of leaders in Africa who are really, really pushing and fighting. And one of the results of that has been the creation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. I was very, very thrilled when they called us in Kigali, Rwanda, and the African Union said, look, we realized the mistakes we made in the Cotonou Agreement, in the Timbuktu Agreement. Africa has been signing lovely, lovely treaties. But why have they not been implemented? It's because the private sector and the diaspora were missing on that table. So they created the $1 trillion initiative led by the African Afro champions, my friend Edem in Ghana and the Ofuso in Ghana did a great job with President Obasanjo, Mbeki, Haile Mariam as patrons, and Raila Odinga. And for the first time, the politicians held the hands of their young African professionals and said, look, you lead the vision. This has been missing. You cannot do any project, whether in America or Asia, without the political patronage. And Africa has woken up and said, look, let's create a think tank. Let's give the role of implementing the new Africa to the private sector. Now, that's very, very important because the Africa Continental Free Trade Area has given the legal regulatory platform for cross-border value corridors like Travaco to thrive. And I have to emphasize that Travaco is not a dream. Each of the anchor projects of Travaco has been well scoped. I believe Tanzania 5 years, DRC 2 years, Uganda is home country, but I believe less years in Uganda than across many countries in Africa, Europe, Asia, and America. So we've copied and we've adopted best practices from around the world, but each of the projects is driven by a very, very good business case. Here where I am in Dubai, it was a poor little desert country that admired Central Africa, but because of visionary leadership and determination, they've built, an oasis of wealth. However, the desert is really eating them up, and that's something else to talk about one day. So Travaco is the realization process of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, but we are not alone. When we discuss Travaco, we are looking at linking and interlinking existing corridors. Without doing that, we would also create an extractive, system in Africa. There are corridors like Lobito, which is Lobito Port to Beira in Mozambique. There is the Dar es Salaam to Kigali corridor, which I was very, very honored to be a transaction advisor to advise in its inception stages. There's the LAPSAT corridor, but all these corridors have been designed by governments and they lack the essential value corridor approach, which I'll talk about later. Secondly, it's very important to understand that without our own ethnic patient capital, we fall short. He who pays the piper falls the short. You cannot use the meager budgetary resources to build the prosperity that the Africans, whether in the diaspora or on the continent, desire. I mean, first of all, taxing your own people creates a lot of problems, and the budgetary resources are so small. That's why Africa finds itself in a huge infrastructure deficit. We have to generate patient capital in multiple times of our existing budgets. And I want to set the record straight. This is not going to take 10, 20 years because of the technology, because of the organization ADDI brings, because of the glut of money in the global capital markets. Travaco, the essential stages, the wow moment can be realized in 3 to 5 years. This should be good info for any of you trying to rush out of here to your creator. We can realize this 3 to 5 years. And then, of course, cities never stop growing. We can go to second phase, which will be the 10 to 15 year period. But the first 5 years and ramp up periods, all we need is 5 to 7 years. Now, finally, in this second part, we have to realize that education is very important. We cannot keep generating master's holders and PhD engineers who can't even make a light bulb. The theoretical education was part of the design, just like the financing, that has us begging all over the world, yet we hold the collateral. So how do we do it? In Travaco, we've designed centers of excellence, and we want to design more. Center of excellence for engineering and project management, center of excellence for project finance. And then we scale this up to the Travaco University. We don't believe in Africa that we retire. Actually, at 70 years in Africa, traditional Africa, that's the time you start a new family. So in Africa, in retirement, age is wisdom. So we must think differently and understand that we shouldn't allow the best of our people to be grown, to be sent to the countryside. And yet these would be the engineers and tutors of our youth. Now, the third point I wanted to talk about is the master plan. I sent to this ADDI Forum of Engineers the 7-year Travaco business plan, sent you the terms of reference, sent you the structure of critical labor we need. But let me repeat some of the key salient features of the Travaco master plan. Unlike the extraction corridors that just focus on the subsystems and transport energy. Yes, we call that in engineering and project management parlance the intended logistics system, the ILS. Now, this is, of course, the hub port, the railways, the pipelines, the fiber, the broadband. All this is well and good, but that is derived demand, all right? The centers of value, the organs of the Travaco are the corridor anchor towns. They must be master planned as special economic zones. And at the center of each of these corridor anchor towns must be an innovation and business incubation center. Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest wealth Africa has are its youth, not just the minerals, not the water, the fresh water, we know there's a lot there, not the energy, but our youth. And the innovation and business incubation centers are the ones that turn these youth, millions of them, into the new entrepreneurs, the new creators of African unicorns and camels. It's very, very important. And we've developed a program called the Innovation and Business Incubation Center for Africa, IBICA, a program we would like to work with our people in the diaspora and around the world to develop a system of creating these IBICs. Now, the IBICs anchor the SME parks. If we just develop corridor anchor towns and special economic zones for multinationals, we have failed. We could make all the rhetoric we want, but it must be a system of master plan so that we codify, we have bylaws in our master plan, planning guidelines, so that anybody who comes in, this template, the IBICs are the DNA of the value corridor. Now, once we have the SME parks, and I'm not just talking about manufacturing, in the smile curve, manufacturing is just the lowest part of the value curve. In creating these SME parks, I'm looking at research and development, looking at branding, I'm looking at logistics, I'm looking at financing. Once we control the value ecosystem of the SMEs, we are home and dry, because the SMEs are the ecosystem that attract the multinationals, that attract the larger companies. They cannot survive without vibrant SMEs. Here in Dubai, the SMEs control 80% of the economy, all right? I think in China, it's almost like 85 to 90. So it's very, very important. So I have 5 minutes. So the patient capital is very, very important. And finally, the Travaco Trust that I'll talk about in the Q&E. The implementation, number one, is the master plan is the next phase. It will take about 18 months, 12 to 18 months. It requires about 550 million. Concurrent to the execution of the master plan will be the development of a blockchain and digital economy team. Then third, there are quick wins during the 18 months, low-hanging fruit like the Kagera Aerotropolis, the Tanga Hub Port, and the beginning of the Tanga Kipsangani first phase of the railway, the Kasanda Gold City in Uganda, which has already started, the master plan and the artisanal miners, the Travaco University, and the Travaco Investment Bank. This is part of the implementation process. The manpower, I've already sent ADI, the composition of the PMO, but suffice to say that our development approach is EPCM, and we have to control with the EPC contractors, the execution through subcontracting to competent firms in the diaspora and Africa. And to do this, we need very good people like systems engineers, because the master planning is a systems of systems approach. And for every anchor project, be it airport, railways, we need strategic planners, we need senior engineers, and of course, we need a surveying team that is top-notch, people who can do digital terrain mapping, LiDAR surveys, etc., etc. Finally, financing. Travaco does not burden host governments with sovereign guarantees. We don't use that approach. We use a structured project finance. The wonderful Dr. Arikana has described the MTN bond, which is simply we register the bond. These are legal regulatory costs, takes about 650,000. That's just one approach. The bond is insurance wrapped, sold on a private placement, and then the proceeds of the bond don't go directly to the project. We create a sink fund where our interbank traders trade that, and the yields from that then go to the projects, which then don't, it's self-amortizing. The excess profits go to the projects. So that's one approach. We also need to monetize our media. The diaspora and Africa has wonderful media talent. The singers, the performers. Today you can sell their videos across Asia and you make a lot of money. And then you take this money and you plow it into the project. We also have, we can create special purpose acquisition companies. ADDI has some ultra wealthy individuals. All you need is 20%. Take this company, this SPAC, to this stock exchange, raise money, and then we invite you. We can give you block shares in Travaco, in the holding company, or in the subsidiary. The master plan of Travaco will create about 20 potentially valuable companies, which would be very, very important. Finally, we are going to create the digitization of Travaco, and we plan to issue several cryptocurrencies to monetize the ecosystem, stablecoin based on the collateral we are going to create in the mines and cities. And it's a very wonderful story. We have, some things which are proprietary, but that is ready to go. So I thank you very much, and I'm sorry for running over time, but I'll be very, very happy to provide clarifications. And thank you very much. Back to Dr. Arikana. Thank you.